Hey guys, and welcome to the first video for Chapter 16, where we'll be talking about post-classical India. So to start off with, it's very important to understand that throughout the majority of India's history, it was decentralized, meaning that you did not have too many instances of strong, united, centralized rule. In ancient India, we talked about the Maurya Empire and the Gupta Empire and so forth. They were more the exception as opposed to the rule. Right, throughout most of its history, you didn't have one single Indian emperor, and it would remain that way really up until the 1800s when it was conquered by the British. You had a couple of dynasties that established themselves here and there, but decentralization is a big theme to remember with Indian history. Now, part of the reason for this was because northern India was constantly under, I'll just say subjection. I'm not going to say, kind of under threat necessarily of foreign invasions. And the invasions weren't always violent. Sometimes they were migrations. These nomadic people, they migrated into northern India. And you look at, going back to the Indo-Aryan migrations, the original ones into the Indus River Valley. You see them coming through this region here that is known as the Khyber Pass. Through here, all right? They come from, what today would be Iran and Afghanistan into what today would be Pakistan, actually, okay, and then eventually down farther into the Indian subcontinent. You get a little bit more of a zoom in here with the modern day borders. Here's the Khyber Pass, right on the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. But remember, up until 1947, Pakistan was all a part of India. So we're still talking about the entrance into India. Eventually, a lot of these different nomadic groups, and most of them were Turkish, from Central Asia, they would become assimilated into the caste system and into larger Indian society. So most of them didn't remain separate for all that long. Another reason why you had such decentralized rule was the strength of local rulers. All of these different, let me just erase this part so it doesn't get confusing. Okay. You look at this, all of the different states that it was broken up into. Okay, I'm not going to try and go through all the names of it, but you get a sense that you don't have a tremendous amount of unity going on. The local Rajas were really more in control. This was demonstrated in the failure, actually, of one attempt to create centralized rule with this guy Harsha. You see the empire of Harsha up here towards the north. That didn't last for very long. He tried to create alliances with all of these guys down in the south, and it really didn't work out. And he was just, constantly on the move and constantly fighting until eventually he was assassinated. So, Harsha is an example of why it just does not work out. And centralization and separate kingdoms was really the rule. Okay, Islam in India. Arab forces, they started to kind of come into India, Actually, Arab merchants were coming into India even before Muhammad. But then when they largely converted to Islam, they would continue to come in. And forces, of the Abbasid dynasty were coming in by the 6th and 7th century. And they established a kind of state, a Muslim state in the region known as Sindh. They conquered Sindh in 711. And it, became a part of the Dar al-Islam. It became part of, all of the lands under the law of Islam. And it would remain here, Sindh over here. Okay, show you that same one where Harsha was going on. Sindh had this one. This would be a little afterwards, okay? But here's the region of Sindh over kind of along the Indus River Valley. And it would remain Muslim control, kind of a nominal part of the Abbasid dynasty up until the dynasty falls in 1258. Now, merchants, as I said before, they were coming from the Middle East even before Islam became a thing. And Muslim merchants, they spread Islam along the coastal regions. Right? You look at all the different trading routes. Okay, let me get rid of this. There we go. Okay, all these trading routes, some overland, right? You see here through the Khyber Pass, much more in terms of maritime trade routes that would come to Calicut, Bambahor, and so forth, and make their way around Ceylon, okay, this little island that would become Sri Lanka later, and they would establish presences in these port cities. Eventually, they would spread Islam along coastal trading routes, and Arab merchants really dominated Indian basin trade, right? You see how they go all the way through here into Southeast Asia, even some all the way to the Far East to China. One kind of, I guess, well, really the first example of centralized Islamic rule in India was with this guy, Mahmud of Ghazni. He was a Turkish ruler in what today is Afghanistan, rocked a very pointy crown. And see this area up here from Iran to Afghanistan. From the year 1001 to 1027, he led invasions into India. Okay, he would kind of, he conquered the upper Indus Valley, but then would kind of lead raiding invasions in through here. And he conquered largely through this area, which is known as the Punjab. Kind of an area in debate between Pakistan and India today. He was much more interested in plundering than ruling, though, and he was also largely responsible for driving Buddhism out of northern India. They went in and, Islamic forces, they destroyed Buddhist temples and drove priests out and things of that nature. So Buddhism was really fully driven out of the country of its birth because of this guy. Now, even though he was not all that big on establishing a really, organized government, his descendants were, and the people that came afterwards. And they established what became known as the Sultanate of Delhi. This would last for a while, about 300 years, from 1206 to 1526. And this controlled most of northern India. Now, it kind of varied into its earliest. You see kind of the heaviest pink outline where it was about halfway down the subcontinent till its height in 1335 where it controlled almost the entire subcontinent, but then would be driven back by 1525 and really just control up around the north. It was never a completely dominant ruling power. It had to rely on working with the Hindu subjects and local princes and so forth, but still was an example of somewhat centralized control. Now, the Hindu kingdoms, they were very decentralized, right? The local rajas had control, like that map that we showed you before. Overall, there was a lot less warfare in the south than there was in the north. You didn't have as many invasions that would make their way down to the subcontinent. You didn't have kind of quite of the, nomadic warrior people that were constantly fighting for control in the north. You have two kind of major examples of kingdoms. One is Chola. Okay, you see, Chola really only the gray area controlled the very southern tip of the subcontinent and what today would be Sri Lanka, used to be called Ceylon, but they controlled basically the entire trading basin through what today would be like Sumatra and Borneo, and even into Thailand and so forth. They were much more interested. Gotta wait for the bell. They were much more interested in profit than conquest. So for them, it was about kind of spheres of influence and controlling trading routes. The other was, make sure I get this one, Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar did conquer a little bit farther north, up into the Bengal region and so forth, but still, that was really about it when it came to centralized rule in southern India with the Hindu kingdoms. For the most part, it was decentralized and ruled by individual princes. All right, so that was just a quick introduction into some of the politics of India, and then next one we will get into trade and society.